Sometimes, you find yourself doing things and you have no idea why. Why did you yell at your brother? Why did you choose to stay with your current college course instead of taking a new one? Why did you argue with your parents about something you don't even care about? Our subconscious controls a huge amount of our behaviors, and thus the reasons behind many of our decisions in life can be shrouded in mystery. However, if you know how to look, you can gain a greater understanding of yourself, why you make the decisions that you do, what makes you happy, and how you might change for the better. Knowing oneself is critical to being an effective team member as well as being successful in life, work, and relationships. Your personal identity influences everything you do, and it changes and evolves over time. The purpose of this video series is to help you deepen your understanding and appreciation for who you are as a person. We will explore how you see yourself through the lenses of personal identity, your skills and talents, roles, values, personal core, and how you meet your psychological needs. We will also examine how you respond to the pressures of changes and transitions in life. You will have an opportunity to examine how your personal identity has been shaped by a variety of people and experiences. My name is Dex Camitan, a PhD student and lecturer at the University of the Philippines, a psychology professor at the Manila Titana Colleges, a big psychology nerd, and I will be your guide as you embark in your journey to understand yourself. In this video, we will talk about how various philosophers viewed the concept of self. Philosophy employs the inquisitive mind to discover the ultimate causes, reasons, and principles of everything. It goes beyond the scientific investigation by exploring all areas of knowledge such as religion, psychology, politics, physics, and even medicine. Hence, the etymological definition of philosophy, love of wisdom, could pertain to the desire for truth by formulating never-ending questions to provide answers to every inquiry about the nature of human existence. The nature of the self is a topic of interest among philosophers. Now, the philosophical framework for understanding the self was first introduced by the ancient Greek philosophers Socrates and Plato. In particular, Socrates know thyself, but what exactly does know thyself mean? What is the self and the qualities that define it? This video presents an overview of the philosophical perspectives of the self to assist you in identifying your own self. To gain knowledge, we intend to give you a wider perspective in understanding the self. The different views of prominent philosophers regarding the nature of the self are briefly discussed in this video. And while there are agreements, or rather disagreements, in how philosophers view of the self, most of them agree that self-knowledge is a prerequisite to a happy and meaningful life. So, step into my office and let's talk. Our journey to understanding the self begins in ancient Greece. In here, we will learn how two of its most prominent figures in philosophy view the concept of the self. For Socrates, the self is synonymous with the soul. He believes that every human possesses an immortal soul that survives the physical body. Socrates was the first to focus on the full power of reason on the human self, who we are, who we should be, and who will we become. Socrates suggests that reality consists of two dichotomous realms, the physical realm and the ideal realm. The physical realm is unchangeable, transient, and imperfect. The ideal realm, on the other hand, is unchanging, eternal, and immortal. The physical world in which man lives belong to the physical realm. On the other hand, the unchanging, eternal, perfect realm includes the intellectual essence of the universe, concepts such as truth, goodness, and even beauty. The soul belongs to this realm. Socrates explains that the essence of the self or the soul is the immortal entity. The soul strives for wisdom and perfection, and reason is the soul's tool to achieve this exalted state. But then, as long as the soul is tied to the body, the quest for wisdom is inhibited by the imperfections of the physical realm, where it wanders and it is confused. Socrates thus suggests that man or women must live in an unexamined life, and a life of purpose and value. For him, an unexamined life is not worth living. The individual person can have a meaningful and happy life only if he becomes virtuous and knows the values of himself that can be achieved through incessant soul searching. He must therefore begin at the source of all knowledge and significance, the self. The Socratic method, the so-called introspection, is a method of carefully examining one's own thought and emotions to gain self-knowledge. Another ancient Greek philosopher, Plato, elaborated on Socrates' concept of the soul. Like Socrates, Plato believed that the self is synonymous with the soul. His philosophy can be explained as a process of self-knowledge and purification of the soul. Specifically, he introduced the idea of a three-part soul or self, which is comprised of reason, physical appetite, and spirit or passion. Reason is the divine essence that enables us to think deeply, make wise choices, and achieve a true understanding of eternal truths. The physical appetite includes our basic biological needs such as hunger, thirst, and even sexual desire. The spirit or passion includes the basic emotions such as love, anger, ambition, aggressiveness, and empathy. These three elements of ourselves are in a dynamic relationship with one another, sometimes even in conflict. When conflict occurs, Plato believes that it is the responsibility of reason to sort out things and exert control, restoring a harmonious relationship among the three elements of ourselves. Further, Plato believes that genuine happiness can only be achieved by people who consistently make sure that their reason is in control of their spirits and appetites. This harmonious integration under the control of reason is the essence of Plato's concept of justice. As such, if man lives in accordance to his nature, then he is giving justice to his existence. Having described his vision of the soul or the self, Plato goes on to elaborate his ideas about the soul. In his theory of forms, he introduced the concept of the two worlds: the world of form, that is the world of non-physical ideas, and the world of senses or reality. While the world of forms is real and permanent, the world of sense is temporary and can only replicate the ideal world. Plato claims that the sensible world is dependent on the ideal world where the concept of the soul belongs. Since the soul is regarded as something permanent, man should give more importance to it than the physical body which resides in the world of senses. So, we continue our historic journey to medieval Europe, where people's view of the self changed quite a lot since ancient Greece. Let us look at how a saint, a skeptic, and an empiricist look at the self. Now, the African philosopher Augustine is regarded as a saint. He is also known as Saint Augustine of Hippo in the Catholic Church. He integrates the idea of Plato and teachings of Christianity. Augustine believes that the physical body is radically different from and inferior to its inhabitant, the immortal soul. As his teaching matures, he developed a more unified perspective of the body and soul. He ultimately came to view the body as a spouse of the soul, both attached to one another by a natural appetite. Now, he believes that the body is united with the soul so that man may be entire and complete. Nevertheless, as a religious philosopher, he contemplates on the nature of man with emphasis on the soul as an important element of man. He believes that the soul is what governs and defines man. In his work, Confessions, Augustine describes that humankind is created in the image and likeness of God. Everything created by God, who is all good, is good. Therefore, the human person being created by God is always geared towards the good. Augustine is convinced that the self is known only through knowing God. Augustine espouses the significance of reflection, as well as the importance of prayers and confessions to arrive at a justification for the existence of God. For him, knowledge can only be seen, or can only come by seeing the truth that dwells within us. The truth of which Augustine speaks refers to the truth of knowing God. God is for him transcendent, and the self seeks to be united with God through faith and reason. His mission to discover the truth is on the existence of God. Augustine develops the fundamental concept of the human person, and thus provides the philosophical principle, I am doubting, therefore I am. So, for French philosopher Rene Descartes, is the father of modern philosophy. He has brought an entirely new perspective to philosophy and the self. He wants to penetrate the nature of reasoning process and understand its relationship to the human self. The Latin phrase cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, is a keystone of Descartes' concept of the self. For him, the act of thinking about the self, of being self-conscious, is in itself proof that there is a self. He is confident that no rational person will doubt his or her own existence as a conscious thinking entity, while we are aware of thinking about ourselves. For Descartes, this is the essence of the human self, a thinking entity that doubts, understands, analyzes, questions, and reasons. He contends further that if man reflects thoughtfully, he will realize that there are two dimensions of the human self: the self as a thinking entity and the self as a physical body. In particular, he introduced the idea of the thinking self or soul as a non-material, immortal, conscious being and independent of the physical laws of the universe. In contrast, the physical body is a material, mortal, non-thinking entity fully governed by the physical laws of nature. In other words, the soul and the body are independent of one another, and each can exist and function without the other. The essential self, the self as a thinking entity, is distinct from the self as a physical body. Simply put, for Rene Descartes, the thinking self can exist independently of the physical body. Lastly, Scottish philosopher David Hume suggests that if people carefully examine their sense experience through the process of introspection, they will discover that there is no self. According to Hume, what people experience is just a bundle of collections of different perceptions. Hume maintains that if people carefully examine the contents of their experience, they will find that there are only distinct entities: impressions and ideas. Impressions are the basic sensations of people's experience, such as hate, love, joy, grief, pain, cold, and heat. Impressions are vivid perceptions and are strong and lively. Ideas, on the other hand, are thoughts and images from impressions, so they are less vivid and lively. Hume further posits that different sensations are in a constant continuum that is invariable and not constant. Hume argues that it cannot be from any of these impressions that the idea of self is derived, and consequently, there is no self. Hume's skeptical claim on this issue is that people have no experience of a simple and individual impression that they can call the self, where the self is the totality of a person's conscious life. Subsequently, the idea of personal identity is the result of imagination. Lastly, we look at how modern philosophers view and understand the concept of the self. While a lot has changed in the world of philosophy since ancient Greece and medieval Europe, we see themes and ideas being modified and fitted to the modern life. For German philosopher Immanuel Kant, it is the self that makes experiencing an intelligible world possible, because it is the self that is actively organizing and synthesizing all our thoughts and perceptions. The self, in the form of consciousness, utilizes conceptual categories, which he calls transcendental deductions of categories. Two can be investigated scientifically. Kant believes that the self is an organizing principle that makes a unified and intelligible experience possible. It is metaphorically above or behind sense experiences, and it uses the categories of our mind to filter, order, relate, organize, and synthesize sensations into a unified whole. In other words, the self constructs its own reality, actively creating a world that is familiar, predictable, and most significantly, mine. The self is the product of reason, a regulative principle, because the self regulates experience by making unified experiences possible. The self transcends experience because the mind can grasp aspects of reality which are not limited to the senses. Through rationality, people are able to understand certain abstract ideas that have no corresponding physical object or sensory experience. Second, we talk about British philosopher Gilbert Trial, who believes that the self is best understood as a pattern of behavior, the tendency or disposition of a person to behave in a certain way in certain circumstances. Ryle's concept of the human self thus provides the philosophical principle, I act, therefore I am. Ryle considers the mind and the body to be intrinsically linked in the complex and intimate ways. In short, the self is the same as bodily behaviors. He concludes that the mind is the totality of disposition that is known through the way people behave. Nevertheless, Riley is convinced that the mind expresses the entire system of thoughts, emotions, and actions that make up the human self. Lastly, for French philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty, he argues that all knowledge about the self, for instance, understanding the nature of the self, is based on the phenomena of experience. That is, the I is a single integrated core identity, a combination of the mental, physical, and emotional structures around a core identity of the self. He further articulates that when people examine the self at the fundamental level of different human experiences, people will discover that the mind and body are unified, not separate. He notes in his book Phenomenology of Perception that everything that people are aware of is contained within the consciousness. Consciousness for him is a dynamic form responsible for actively structuring conscious ideas and physical behaviors. He is convinced that consciousness, the world, and the human body are intricately intertwined in perceiving the world. So, this ends our short discussion of defining the self from various philosophical perspectives. If you are enrolled in an understanding the self course which I handle, I need you to do the following activity. In your book, or rather in your notebook, in your in Google World, Google World, in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, I need you to answer the following questions. To which philosopher do you agree the most? Number 2, to which philosopher do you disagree the most? And number 3, what is your concept of the self? And that ends our discussion for today. My name is Tex Kamitan, and thank you for watching.